H.R. 43.
Without objection, the bill will be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Fry, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 4323, the Trafficking Survivors Relief Act, is a strong, bipartisan, bicameral piece of legislation that will help our most vulnerable populations. This legislation passed committee last Congress via voice vote, and I'm looking forward to seeing it pass again today. Human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking, is a heinous crime that tragically continues to grow in America and around the world. While international sex trafficking may be more widely known, domestic sex trafficking also persists in the United States. Traffickers even use social media to lure innocent people to become victims. Human trafficking can occur anywhere. Women and children who make the dangerous journey to cross the southern border into the United States have a high likelihood of being trafficked. A study by the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women estimated that 60% of unaccompanied alien children are exploited by cartels or smugglers for child pornography and drug trafficking. In the United States, an adult or child can be trafficked and exploited at hotels, truck stops, in their homes, and online. Trafficking victims are exploited in cities, suburban and rural areas. It can happen anytime and anywhere. Efforts by federal, state, and local law enforcement and advocates to eliminate human trafficking and support victims have increased awareness, reporting, and prosecution of sex traffickers across the country. However, victims of these crimes are also sometimes initially charged with the crime themselves. Traffickers use force, fraud, and coercion to induce their victims to commit these crimes. This can lead to the arrest, conviction, and incarceration of trafficked victims without consideration of their victim status. Thankfully, we as a country have made significant progress to help victims and survivors move forward with their lives. The vast majority of states provide some sort of relief to victims for nonviolent offenses committed while under the control of their traffickers. I think 47 states have something very similar, if not exactly the same as this bill. These laws allow victims to move on from these horrors, re-enter their communities, and get on with their lives. My home state of South Carolina continues to lead on this forward, victim-centered approach. The Trafficking Survivors Relief Act follows the state's clear lead and provides federal relief to survivors of human trafficking who committed a nonviolent offense as a direct result of having been a victim of human trafficking. For a court to grant a motion to vacate a conviction or expunge an arrest, a defendant must show that the offense was committed as a direct result of having been a victim of human trafficking. To ensure that these opportunities are only available to true victims of trafficking and not perpetrators themselves, leaders of the bill worked hard, hand in hand with law enforcement, to enact appropriate safeguards for the bill. This legislation allows for additional evidence to be considered, including the sworn testimony of a law enforcement officer as to whether a victim had any role in coercing other victims into criminal offenses. This bill would restore trafficking victims and reintegrate them into their families and communities while making sure that law enforcement and the courts can protect the public safety. This legislation is endorsed by advocacy organizations, faith-based organizations, the law enforcement community. Last Congress, multiple attorneys general wrote in strong support of the Trafficking Survivors Relief Act. Simply put, this legislation strikes the right balance between victims' rights and public safety. Let's work together to fight back against the evils of human trafficking and help victims and survivors move forward with their lives. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Ranking members recognized for an opening statement.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the distinguished gentleman for his statement. I'm pleased we're marking up the bipartisan Trafficking Survivors Relief Act, a bill which is going to provide relief to victims and survivors of human trafficking who themselves have been unjustly targeted and criminalized as a result of their involvement in trafficking as victims. We've been pushing for nearly a decade to make this relief available at the federal level, and I'm delighted that we're able to work together on a bipartisan basis, and I look forward to its swift passage. But America, Mr. Chairman, is going to be wondering how we can pass a bill today called the Trafficking Survivors Relief Act when we turn a blind eye and a cold shoulder to the trafficking survivors who came to Washington, D.C. last week to demand the complete, comprehensive release of the Epstein Files. It's not going to make any sense to America. In fact, it's going to look like we're trying to cover up for the cover-up that's taking place of the Epstein Files. You know, the administration moved unilaterally to get Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, partner in sex crime, moved from her prison in Florida to a minimum security prison nicknamed Club Fed in Texas. This shocked the Epstein survivors, who came to Washington last week and said this blatantly preferential treatment of Maxwell, which may border on witness tampering, was, quote, the justice system failing victims right before our eyes. But this isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, who's being protected by the members of Congress who refused to sign on to the discharge petition? By the way, we have a new member of Congress today from Virginia who has just come to join us. And he's adding his name to the discharge petition. That means any one of my colleagues on the Republican side can be the deciding signature on the discharge petition. You can take a stand and be a profile in courage, at least in standing up against Donald Trump. It's not really a profile in political courage because the vast majority of the American people want to see it. But I guess these days standing up against Donald Trump is what qualifies as political courage in Lincoln's party. But look who's being protected if you don't sign it. Well, all of those who abused children right alongside Jeffrey Epstein. All of his unnamed, unidentified co-conspirators who were protected by Alex Acosta's original corrupt bargain immunity agreement. All those people are being protected by your silence, your passivity. All of the banks, like Deutsche Bank, which allowed, facilitated, and failed to report the transactions that allowed this massive child trafficking ring to proceed. Millions and millions of dollars moving around the country to give to the girls, to cover it up, to pay people off. And then the modeling agencies that were used as a big cover story to traffic and abuse these children. That's who's being protected by your complicity with this new plot after Donald Trump performed a U-turn and decided, no, he didn't want the Epstein Files out anymore. But that's not all, because this administration has been systematically dismantling 25 years worth of bipartisan progress made in combating trafficking and in protecting the victims and survivors, all while claiming they're making America safe again. But they're starving the offices and programs of funding and of staffing, and they've made it much harder to prosecute child traffickers and sex offenders. In February, the DOJ's Office on Violence Against Women removed all information on funding opportunities against human trafficking from the website. In April, the DOJ's Office of Justice Programs terminated hundreds of grants awarded to state and local law enforcement, defunding the police, and nonprofit groups that help survivors of sexual and domestic violence. Take the Hope and Healing Survivor Resource Center, based in the chairman's beautiful home state of Ohio. Hope and Healing provides emergency shelter, crisis services, and support to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, including women like KC, a stay-at-home mom who found a loaded pistol and 2 shotguns hidden in her house just days after her husband sexually assaulted her. Hope and Healing was able to get KC and her kids out of the house and helped her to land on her feet. Federal grants make up 75% of that group's budget. Losing that funding would force Hope and Healing to fire their staff, including court advocates who help survivors navigate the legal system. This is going on throughout the federal government. They are gutting the anti-human trafficking programs. So leaving aside all of the political finger-pointing back and forth and who got there first to denounce child sex trafficking and so on, let's leave that to the side. Why don't we get together and say that we are going to work together to restore all of the funding and all the programs that have been gutted by the Trump administration so far. And we'll have more to say about exactly how that's happening. I'm glad to see Congress is going to act to support victims and survivors in this bill. I urge my colleagues to support it, but I would also encourage all of our colleagues across the aisle to join committee Democrats to ensure that the federal government is doing whatever it can to empower the survivors and the victims of sex trafficking. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back without objection. All other opening statements will be included in the record. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a
Without
substitute.
objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered base text